Part 9, Descent into Darkness. This is a fantastic message written on the map here. This is paraphrasing of a very well-known quote that I'll cover here in a second. He who is not bold enough to be stared at from across the abyss is not bold enough to stare into himself. So someone from Team Silent, if not all, if not at least a few, were pretty heavily into the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, or at least knew about him, right? So shortly after losing Maria to Pyramid Head, James finds a map, which is an important message for him. The writing on the map is paraphrasing a passage from the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, right? I'm going to read this quote from Nietzsche and look at how similar it is to the message on the map. Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Right? This is a message for James that he's going to need to go a lot deeper into the abyss, which of course means he's going to have to be jumping down a lot of holes. He's going to have to go into the darkest places of his unconscious psyche, the most terrifying places, and confront some of those things that he doesn't consider are part of himself, doesn't want to acknowledge within himself, yet he has to go there if he wants to seek reconciliation over the torment of Mary's death, right? This is where James has to go. And so it's funny because at one of the lowest points in the game, here is this map that appears with this message for James, right? It's almost like that old adage, it's always darkest before the dawn. James is in this really dark place, and here he finds something to keep him going, some sort of direction, right? Because he's just lost Maria, right? He's seen her slayed right in front of him. And so this message on the map is saying, you must persist, and you're going to go even deeper, and you're going to go to even darker places, and it's going to suck. And oh, by the way, it could either turn you into a monster or kill you, or the other option is you confront those things, and this is the hero's journey in your life, in my life, in everyone's life. This is just profoundly sophisticated and deep storytelling in Silent Hill 2. But this journey of this abyss, going into these dark, scary places within yourself, right? This is what James is doing. It either destroys him and kills him, turns him into a monster, or the other option is that he destroys these monsters or slays. He burns away these aspects of himself through the struggle, and he becomes a better person, or he at least reconciles his death with the death of Mary, right, in some way, and he can move on with his life. This is it's incredible storytelling in Silent Hill 2. So there's also some practical advice included in the writings on the map. Okay, it also says the truth can only be learned by marching forward. Follow the map. There's a letter and a wrench. So some practical information here. In case this stuff about the abyss and everything is lost on James or the audience, it's like, go find the letter and the wrench. The moment James picks up the hospital lobby key, right, to continue on his journeys, when he spots Laura walking by from the window. She's walking outside in the dark all by herself. She is showing James, and remember, Laura represents the inner child of James that he's trying to connect with. She's telling him about, she knew Mary, she has a letter, and he wants to know more. And he has to confess something to Laura. He has to confess it because Laura is his inner child. So He has to confess it to himself. He has to confess his guilt, right? So Laura is showing James that he must go deeper into the darkness. So the map is saying this, pointing him in this direction. The message on the map's telling him, and he sees Laura go by. So all of the signs are pointing to James and telling him, you need to go further. You need to go into the darkness, right? He needs to shine his inner light fearlessly into the abyss. At least he must try. Even if it kills him, he must try, right? That's the hero's journey. I mean, it's good stuff. So, just as the message on the map and seeing Laura appear to point the way for James, right? He's being shown some things. He has a moment where he recoils in fear because he feels like this is going to be, can I do this, right? Like this is something in all of our lives. Sometimes we think, can I do this? This is going to be really, I might die. I might, who knows what's going to happen? This great unknown is like scary to all of us, and it's scary to James. So in this moment, James is starting to realize just how much further he needs to go into the unknown, which is really freaking far, right? Really deep. And this realization is shaking James to his core. He's recoiling back in fear a little. Well, a lot, really. Right? To put it more accurately, James is in fear of his deepest self because he doesn't know what he's going to find there. And it might just destroy him, right? And so in this moment, James says, Maria's dead. I couldn't protect her. Mary, what should I do? So he's in such fear that he asks his dead wife for guidance instead of trusting himself, right? So James is at a very low point. So James follows the map and finds the letter, right? And the letter's telling him, perhaps you are a fool. The truth always betrays people. The message in this letter is telling him a couple of things. It's telling him to go to the old society. It's also representing some real fears that are coming up for him now, because he realizes, oh shit, I'm in the shit now. I just lost Maria, and okay, what do I do now? There's this message here telling me I got to go into the abyss. That sounds fucking scary. So on his way to the old society, of course, he needs to go to Rosewater Park to get the key, of course, in the metal box. James arrives at what was once Neely's bar, and he finds some writing on the walls here. And it says, there was a hole here. It's gone now. And this phrase may refer to Stephen King's book, The Langoliers, as many have suggested. However, in my mind, making a reference to another work just for the sake of making a reference doesn't seem to be in keeping with the rich storytelling of the Silent Hill series. There's probably something more significant going on here. So you have to ask yourself, why is the hole gone now? Right? And the answer seems more likely that the abandoned bar was once a place where people filled an empty hole in themselves with liquor. Right? This isn't an anti-alcohol ad or anti-drinking ad or anything. But this is something James mentions when he closely inspects some of the bottles in the Heaven's Night bar. So he makes mention of this filling of a hole, right? This is a direct reference here. He also reads some other messages on the walls. If you really want to see Mary, you should just die. This is more of his fear and his guilt coming up, just like the letter, right? And another message, but you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James, right? So more fear, more guilt. It seems that James is simultaneously confronting guilt and condemnation through these messages. So after leaving Neely's bar, James makes his way to Rosewater Park. It is here that James must dig under the statue of Jennifer Carroll, right? Remember who she is. She was the founding member of the order. She was accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1692, right? 1692 was also the year that Queen Mary II died, incidentally. I wonder if this was... that just occurred to me. Anyway, side note. James finds a metal box secured by bolts, which he uses the wrench to open. Inside the box is a bronze key, which gives James access to the Silent Hill Historical Society. Right. Let's take a side let's go on a little side note here, or a side street, as it were, and talk about some of the symbolism so far that we've seen in Silent Hill 2. So the object symbolism found in this game, while not as systematically organized as the first Silent Hill game, is still definitely worth exploring in more detail. A lot about this park is steeped in the Shakti energy. And when I say Shakti, if you were with me a little earlier, the Shakti is the divine feminine energy. It's the yin energy, it's the dark energy, it's the feminine energy throughout the cosmos. And it's manifested in, of course, the human female of one of many manifestations. But rose water itself is used in the religious ceremonies of Muslim, Hindu, Zoroastrian, and some Eastern Orthodox Christian religions. Burial ceremonies in India involve cleansing the deceased with rose water, followed by cremation, and then spreading the ashes along a river. It's interesting that James has to dig up a key intentionally placed under a statue of a martyr who was burned at the stake, right? The key itself that he recovers is made of bronze. Bronze is an alloy of two metals, primarily copper and also tin. These are both metals that are highly significant in the process of spiritual alchemy. The symbol, so I'm going to show you the symbol in the white panel here on the top. This represents tin. In alchemy, tin is used to invoke the planet Jupiter. This is a masculine energy which represents harmony between hot and cold. It signifies growth, renewal, and transition. In the black panel below is the symbol representing copper. And copper is used to invoke the planet Venus, which is a feminine energy. It symbolizes love, balance, and harmony. So here again, in these two metals, with this key, we're reminded of the theme of Silent Hill 2, which is sex and death, or masculine and feminine. Now let's go a little deeper here with the alchemy stuff. While the operations of alchemy are not as clearly recognizable as with the first Silent Hill game, many of the same elements appear in Silent Hill 2. Many of the occult references in Silent Hill 2 remain as echoes left behind from the legacy of the first game. This isn't to say that Silent Hill 2 lacks any of the deep and profound teachings, however, because that certainly is not the case. Now let's talk about the coins here. The gold prisoner coin at the top here, or the seducer, which is a woman on the front and an egg on the back, represents Angela. Now, incidentally, the color gold is symbolic for the masculine, which could be Angela's father. That might be a coincidence. The snake coin, which is silver and has the moon on the back, represents Maria. It was the snake that tempted Eve. In Silent Hill 2, it is Maria that is, of course, the temptress of James. The old man coin represents death, hence the gravestone on the reverse side. This coin represents Eddie and the death of anger, signaling a rebirth of James. Death is also symbolic for Mary, right? Then, of course, there are the other copper, there's the copper and lead rings, which are both metals used in alchemy. Each of these correlate to the feminine energies of the planets in alchemy. And as we saw earlier, these are used in the Lady of the Door, right? These are both corrosive substances which indicate their propensity for death and renewal, right? This death of Maria that occurs after passing through the Lady of the Door. In the next cutscene, Maria is sacrificed, right? There's a death here happening in front of James, a sacrifice. and a chance at renewal. If James accepts this sacrifice and sees it for what it is, he can let go of this aspect of what he lost in his dead wife, and reach this renewal or move on renewed, right? He's not ready to do this yet. And here on the left, we have the 7 planetary metals from lowest to highest, starting with lead and all the way up through gold. These are the 7 steps of alchemy. And we'll cover this in much more detail at the end of the presentation. So it's no coincidence at this point that James, by the way, James makes, he makes his way to the old society at this point of the game. And it's no coincidence that this is the lowest point or the lowest moment in the story for James, right? And this bottomless pit appears before him. He's lost Maria. He's asking Mary what he should do. He's totally lost here, right? He's at his lowest point. You remember the writing on the map about staring into the abyss? Of course, Maria's just killed. Mary remains a distant memory. James, at this point, has seemingly lost everything. So there's nowhere to go for him but down. So he must completely surrender himself to the unknown. Right? What else does he have left? This is a fantastic quote by Carl Jung. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Right? And this begins James' descent, real descent into the unknown. Right? Because you remember this part of the game. He's jumping down a bunch of holes. There's an elevator. I mean, there's all kinds of weird shit happening. And there's a very important reason for this, right? There's a few reasons for this.